Welcome back. So today we're doing something a little bit different for this deep dive.
Yeah, usually we're looking at, future trends or unpacking some really dense geopolitical theory.
Right.
So,
But today I want to look at a place that I think a lot of us feel like we know, but we actually have it completely wrong.
oh, absolutely. It's a place that suffers from being almost too familiar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we're talking about Lamma Island,
Right.
Hong Kong, and if you've lived in the region or even just visited as a tourist, you probably have a mental image of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the weekend island. You take the ferry over, you eat way too much seafood.
Maybe walk the family trail to burn it off.
Exactly. You grab a bowl of tofu pudding and you go home. It's pleasant, it's chill, and it just feels very simple.
It's the back garden of Hong Kong. That's the classic stereotype. But we've got a stack of research here today. We're talking archaeological reports, military records, oral histories, and it paints a completely different picture.
A much darker, or at least much deeper picture.
Yes. The argument in these documents is that Lamma isn't just a leisure spot. It is, and I quote here, a cultural treasury sealed by time.
Sealed by time. I mean, that's a heavy phrase for a place that's mostly known for, like, wind turbines and fried calamari.
It is, yeah. But the core idea here is really counterintuitive, because we usually think that development is what builds a city's history.
Right. You build a museum, you put up a monument.
Exactly. But in Lamma's case, the research argues that it was the lack of development, what sociologists might call benign neglect, that actually preserved its story.
So basically, because nobody was rushing to build skyscrapers over there, the history just didn't get bulldozed.
Precisely. You really have to look at the timeline. Hong Kong Island and Kowloon. The British grabbed those early on. They started dredging, reclaiming land, building Victoria City. But Lamma remained under Qing government jurisdiction all the way until 1898.
Ah, right. The Convention for the Extension of Hong Kong Territory.
You got it. So for decades, while Hong Kong Island was becoming this bustling colonial metropolis with gas lamps and tram lines, Lamma was effectively frozen in a totally different era. It had no deep water ports, no bridges to the mainland. It was completely isolated.
A desolate ancient city. I think that's how one of the sources actually puts it.
Yeah, and that desolation is the key.
Yeah.
Because the infrastructure was so poor, the big developers just ignored it entirely. And because they ignored it, nobody dug up the foundations.
Wow.
So today we have this paradox where the historically poorest part of Hong Kong is actually the richest in terms of raw, untouched artifacts.
Okay, so our mission today is to verify that claim. We're not doing the standard tourist trail.
Definitely not.
We're going to walk you through 5 specific historical stories from the source material. Stories that proved Lamma is basically a giant time capsule. And we're going to start way further back than I honestly expected.
Yeah, we need to go back about 3,500 years.
See, this is where the whole simple fishing village narrative just totally falls apart for me. Because the standard story is that before the British arrived, Hong Kong was just a barren rock, maybe a few fishermen hanging around.
That is the colonial myth. It's designed to justify the colonization, right? Like, look at us, we brought civilization to the barren rock.
Right.
But the archaeology on Lamma completely destroys that narrative. We are talking about the Bronze Age here, roughly 1500 BC.
And we aren't talking about archaeologists finding a couple of old fishhooks in the sand.
No, not at all. Archaeologists excavating at Taiwan and Hengqin, which, by the way, are the exact beaches where people are currently sunbathing and playing volleyball, they found something incredible there. They found stone molds.
Okay, let's pause on that for a second. Stone molds. Why is a mold more important than, say, finding an ancient sword?
This is a really crucial distinction in archaeology. If I find a bronze sword buried in the ground, it tells me that someone owned a sword there.
Sure.
Maybe they bought it, maybe they traded for it with another village. It's a just consumption. Okay.
But if I find the mold, the actual negative impression used to cast the molten metal, it tells me that the sword was made there.
It changes the site from a consumer to a producer.
Exactly. And these weren't just single-use clay molds either. These were made of stone. That implies durability. It implies mass production. It strongly suggests that 3,500 years ago, Lamma wasn't a quiet little village. It was a regional industrial hub.
A factory floor.
A high-tech factory floor for its time. You really have to imagine the scene. If you stood on Hengqin back then, you wouldn't hear gentle waves and reggae music from a beach bar.
Right.
You'd hear the roar of furnaces. You'd smell the smelting of copper and tin in the air. You'd see highly skilled craftsmen, likely the Bayou people, the indigenous inhabitants of the southeast coast mass-producing axes, spears, and tools.
Man, that really reframes the geography. When you walk that beach today, you are quite literally walking on the ruins of a Bronze Age industrial complex.
It's wild to think about. It really is. It proves Hong Kong had this technical significance thousands of years before the first British ship ever showed up. But the history on Lamma isn't just about ancient industry. As we move forward in the timeline, it becomes very much about the sea, and specifically, the danger of the sea.
Yes. We're jumping forward to the Qing dynasty now, the era of maritime power.
Which, reading between the lines in our sources, is just a polite way of saying the era of pirates.
Very polite, yeah.
And the big name here is Chung Po-tsai.
Yeah.
I feel like he's a figure that looms really large in local folklore. There's that famous cave on Chung Chau Island next door that every school kid goes to visit. You crawl through the dark hole, take a selfie, and leave.
It's a great tourist trap, but historically speaking, it really doesn't hold water.
Why not?
It's a matter of scale.
Mm-hmm.
The historical records tell us that Chung Po-tsai wasn't just some guy with a parrot and a little sloop. He was a warlord.
Right.
He commanded a massive confederation of 50,000 followers and over 500 ships.
50,000. I mean, that is a floating city. You cannot hide a navy of 500 ships in a tiny little tourist cave on Chung Chau.
You physically can't. You need a deep harbor. You need serious logistics. And the research points directly to Lamma, specifically Sa Ku Wan, as a major operational base for his fleet.
So Ko Wan is that really long inlet where all the famous seafood restaurants are now, right?
That's the one. Just look at the geography of it. It's a deep, sheltered inlet with high hills on both sides. If you park a massive fleet in there, ships passing on the horizon, like the Qing Imperial Navy, for instance, they can't see you at all.
It's a natural stealth harbor.
Exactly.
So when we sit there eating chili crab today, we're sitting in the middle of what used to be a pirate stronghold. But there's a tension here that the research highlights, and I found this really poignant. You have the pirates on one side, representing total chaos and violence. But then you have the villagers.
The people caught in the middle, the farmers and the humble fishermen. For them, the sea wasn't a source of power or wealth. It was a source of sheer terror. You had deadly typhoons on one hand, and you had a heavily armed fleet of 50,000 outlaws parked literally next door on the other.
And this is where the Tin Hau Temple comes into the story.
Right. Tin Hau, the goddess of the sea. The expert analysis in our source material calls this the duality of chaos and order.
I love that framing.
It's perfect. The landscape of Sa Ku Wan holds both extremes. You have the caves and the hidden inlet, which is the pirates' domain. And then, standing in direct opposition to that, you have the Tin Hau Temple over at Yangshu Wan.
So it's not just a religious building. It's almost like spiritual infrastructure.
It was a vital survival mechanism. That temple is over 100 years old. It represents the community's desperate need for protection. Because when you're living next to a pirate fleet, you need to believe that someone or something is looking out for you.
So the hidden gem here isn't just the physical temple itself, but the relationship between the temple and the landscape around it. It's a story of how regular people tried to carve out a little bit of order in a world that was just incredibly dangerous.
And speaking of incredibly dangerous worlds, that actually brings us to the third story. And this is the one that I think is the most jarring contrast on the entire island. We're moving up to World War II.
The Japanese occupation.
Yes. Now, Lamma has a very specific, very physical scar from this time period. If you hike near Lo Soxing, you can find the kamikaze caves.
I think a lot of hikers see the little sign for these, but maybe they don't fully grasp what they're actually looking at. Because these aren't natural rock formations.
No, these were dug entirely by hand. They are man-made tunnels bored straight into the rocky coastline, and their purpose was just horrific. The Japanese military, towards the very end of the war, was getting desperate. So they developed these Shinyo suicide boats.
Like a torpedo with a human pilot.
Essentially, yeah. A cheap plywood speedboat packed to the brim with explosives. The grand military strategy was to hide these boats in these dark caves on Lamma. And when Allied ships eventually appeared in the channel, the pilots would speed out and ram them.
Just strategy of total self-destruction.
Complete desperation.
It's chilling. You can stand there on a sunny afternoon, look into these dark, damp tunnels, and just imagine the fear. But the source material does something really interesting here. It doesn't just stay focused on the grand military history or the war machinery. It pivots to what they call micro-history.
This is honestly my favorite part of the research.
Same.
Because usually war history is all about the generals, the troop movements, the weapons. But this research focuses on the victims, the local llama farmers.
Right, because while the Japanese military was busy digging these suicide caves into the coast, the locals were just trying to not starve to death.
Exactly. The occupying troops were hungry, and they would frequently confiscate local livestock. For a llama farmer in the 1940s, a cow was everything.
It was your livelihood.
It was your tractor, your fertilizer, your bank account. If they took your cow, your family simply didn't eat.
So the farmers had to develop this resistance strategy, and the discipline required for this is just. It's heartbreaking to read about.
The oral histories tell us they would wake up at 3 a.m. every single morning.
Pitch black outside.
Pitch black. They would take their cows and physically drive them deep up into the hills, into the dense, thorny scrub where the soldiers wouldn't bother to patrol. They'd hide them up there all day in complete silence and only bring them back down after the sunset.
Imagine the sheer stress of that every single day. Waking up at 3 a.m. to hide a cow so your kids don't starve, while just down the hill, the military is literally building suicide boats.
It totally reframes the hiking experience. When you walk those trails today, you're seeing the juxtaposition of two entirely different types of survival.
Yeah.
You have the caves down by the water, which represent death and destructive ideology. And just up the hill, you have the memory of those farmers, representing life, resilience, and just the simple desire to protect your family.
It's a really powerful reminder. We look at the caves because they are visible structures, right? They're carved into rock. But the real story is up in the hills where nothing was built, but where life was actually preserved.
That underlying theme of toughness really defines the islander identity. And it continues way after the war ends. The fourth story in our stack takes us to the 1950s and 60s.
The era of village life. And I think this is really important context because nowadays, Lamma is full of expats and commuters.
Yeah.
It's got pretty decent regular ferries. But back then,
It was rural, truly deeply rural. Fishing and farming were basically the only industries, and crucially, there was no bridge to the city, there still isn't, and there was no hospital.
the report calls this section the ferry of life. And it focuses on a very specific, very high-stakes scenario, childbirth.
Right. Most women on the island gave birth at home with local midwives. That was just the norm. But if something went wrong, a breech birth, a hemorrhage, any kind of complication, you were in serious trouble. There was no ambulance you could call.
So what did you actually do?
You had to go to the city. You had to get to the Sanyok Hospital in Sayingpun over in Hong Kong Island. But to get there, you had to cross the Lamma Channel.
And we definitely aren't talking about hopping on a high-speed catamaran with air conditioning and life jackets.
Not at all. We're talking about small, open, wooden motorboats. Sampans? Imagine being in active labor in a terrifying medical crisis and having to be carried onto a wooden boat bouncing over rough, dark seas in the middle of the night.
It sounds absolutely terrifying, but the research highlights that this extreme isolation actually created a very specific social structure on the island.
It created an unbreakable web of mutual aid. Because you couldn't survive that scenario alone.
No.
You needed a boatman who was willing to wake up at 2 a.m. and take you. You needed strong neighbors to carry you down to the pier. You needed other people in the village to watch your other kids while you were gone.
So the community wasn't just friendly. It was structurally necessary for survival.
Exactly. In a big city, you can be anonymous. You can completely ignore your neighbors. On Lamma, in the 1960s, your life literally depended on your neighbor. If you alienated the village, you lost your safety net.
So when visitors go to the old villages today, places like Motat Wan or Lu Shing, and they look at those old, weathered village houses, they should view them as monuments to that bond. Those communities were forged by the difficulty of that channel crossing.
It's a perfect example of how physical geography shapes human culture. The water separated them from the hospital, so it forced them to bind to each other.
We have one final story today, and we're going to the very southern tip of the island for this one. A place called Sham Wan.
Also widely known as Turtle Beach.
Now, usually on this deep dive, when we identify a hidden gem from the sources, we're actively encouraging you to go check it out. Go see the Bronze Age ruins, go see the Pyre Temple. But for this one, the advice from the experts is the exact opposite.
The advice is to stay away.
Tell us why.
Sham Wan is incredibly special. It is the only known nested site for endangered green turtles in all of Hong Kong. It's a highly sensitive, rare, ecological niche.
And these turtles are easily disturbed, right?
Very. They are easily spooked by almost anything. Light pollution, loud noises, even just the vibrations from human footsteps on the sand. Any of that can cause a mother turtle to abandon her eggs and return to the sea.
So the government has taken a pretty hard line here to protect them.
They have. It's designated as a site of special scientific interest. And from April 1st to October 31st, so basically half the year, the beach and the surrounding sea inlet are a strictly restricted zone. No entry, no hiking on the sand, no boating in the bay.
And the fine for breaking that rule is not just a slap on the wrist.
Not at all. It's a $50,000 fine.
50,000 Hong Kong dollars. That sends a very clear message.
It really does, but I love the reflection point the authors make here. The source material frames this restriction as an ethical boundary. Because in Hong Kong, land is almost always treated as a commodity. If there's a nice sandy beach, we build a resort. If there's a nice ocean view, we build luxury condos.
But here we've drawn a line in the sand literally and said, no, this doesn't belong to us.
It's a profound act of restraint. We are actively prioritizing the survival of another species over our own human recreation. And that makes chamois a very different kind of hidden gem. Its true value lies in the fact that we don't use it.
So if you're a tourist listening to this and you want to learn about the turtles, do not try to sneak onto the beach for a photo.
Please don't. Go to the Fisherman's Cultural Village instead. They have great educational resources and you can learn all about it without doing any harm. Let the beach remain wild.
It really brings us full circle to the concept we started with today. The Lamma paradox.
It does. Just think about everything we've discussed. The stone molds on the beach, the pirate hideouts, the WWII caves, the nesting turtles. The only reason any of this still exists today is because llama was left behind.
Yeah, if llama had been successful, in air quotes, it had been heavily developed like Kowloon was in the 1970s, the kamikaze caves would be the concrete foundation for a subway station.
The Turtle Beach would be a noisy marina.
And the Bronze Age site would just be another massive shopping mall.
Exactly. The benign neglect, the lack of extreme efficiency, the lack of road bridges that was the savior. It proves that sometimes the absolute best form of preservation is just leaving things alone.
It's a powerful check on our modern obsession with speed and modernization. We always tend to think newer is better, faster is better, more accessible is better. But Llama stands there and says, actually, slower might be smarter.
Or at the very least, slower is richer in history.
So here's our final challenge to you, the listener. The next time you find yourself on that ferry, heading over to Yangshuan, don't just be a consumer of the scenery. Don't just go for the craft beer and the tofu.
Look at the landscape as a historical document.
Exactly. When you walk past the beach, try to imagine the thick smoke of the Bronze Age fires. When you see the dark inlet at Sakuwan, picture a massive pirate fleet hiding in the mist. When you hike past the caves, think about the farmers waking up at 3 a.m. just to save their cows.
And when you see that no entry sign at Chamois, don't get annoyed that your hike is blocked.
Right. View it as a promise that we're still willing to keep some parts of this world sacred for the future. Which actually leaves me with a thought I want you to mull over. In our rush to make every single beautiful place in the world accessible and tourist-friendly, what other places in our own lives are we destroying simply by loving them too much? Sometimes the most profound way to appreciate a place is to simply walk away and let it be.
Because once you pave it, you really can't unpave it.
That's it for this deep dive into Lamma Island. We hope you'll never look at that simple fishing village the same way again. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.